Hello, I'm Grandad. These are difficult and dangerous times, so I thought I'd try to cheer you up a bit and stop you getting bored. I wrote this story for my grandchildren quite some time ago now, when I lived in a very old English cottage in an even older English village, Corfe Castle, buried deep in the beautiful Isle of Purbeck. Now the house has a curious name. It's called the Old Curatage. But if you think of vicarage, you'll understand that it was a house for the curate, not the vicar. Very English. Now, we've moved now, but the video I made is in the actual house where the events in this story of the Curatage ghost unfold. It's a bit silly, but it's a good story with a few scary bits. There is a very slightly updated version available online, should you actually want to buy the book, as either an e-book or as a hard copy. And I recorded 26 fairly short chapters, and will add them as fast as YouTube allows. So come with me and meet some real English ghosts. I think you'll enjoy it. Hello. Well now, you know that time just before you fall asleep, you hear a noise, a creak, is it a whistle? I mean, is it a weep? It could be the north wind. Ooh. Finding the gaps. Or something much scarier. The Curatage ghost, perhaps? But we're all modern kids and have no time for ghosts. But then again, maybe, just maybe, keep smiling, chaps. They're just old stories written to make our flesh creep and frighten us all into a quivering heap. But the fact is, we really like being afraid. It shakes up our certainties, so we're unsure we'll survive. So hear out this tale of the old haunted house. What's that? Is it? Oh, it can't be. Oh my God! Oh. It's only a mouse. Chapter 1 of the Curatage Ghost. There is no such thing as ghosts, said Amelie, with feeling and finality. Esme wasn't quite so sure. It was quite nice to believe in a bit of supernatural. It made the world a more interesting place. The girls were over on holiday from Perth, Australia. A long way from Corfe and very different. Corfe was old, people-wise. Most of the buildings in the centre of the village were built long before a short chap with a funny hat got off a wooden boat on the east coast of Australia in 1777. Just in case you forgot. The natives, of course, didn't think much of this, mind you. They'd been there for 70,000 years before the man with the tricorn hat arrived. A lot longer than those in Corfe, who'd not been there for much more than a couple of thousand years. But Corfe felt older, even though it wasn't. The thing is, Corfe feels like it should, could, and probably is haunted. Modern cities don't feel like that. It's all about feeling, really. Esme thought the cellar in the Curatage was creepy. Amelie did too, but was not going to admit it. Corfe Castle is a busy, chocolate box sort of English village with quite an interesting history. The Romans were here, but they have not left much of a mark. The big feature is obviously the castle. It was mainly a wooden structure on a curiously man-made looking hill when the wicked stepmother, Aelfrith, had teenage temper tantrum expert, the young King Edward, murdered in the stockade. This supposedly was to allow her own son, Ethelred, famously unready, to take the throne of England. Edward, by most accounts, an unpleasant, bad-tempered lout, was later, for convoluted political reasons, made a saint. Such is the way of these things. 100 years later, William arrived, outfoxed King Harold at the Battle of Hastings. That's one in the eye for you, my boy. And became the first well-recognised cartoon character in that still preserved tapestry in Bayeux. William, fearing someone like himself, began building castles to protect his newly stolen realm. Corfe Castle was one of them. The main edifice, situated on the strange steep hill as before, in the only gap in the long escarpment from Lulworth to Swanage. The word Corfe in Old English means gap, so now you know. Anyway, in around 1142, the castle was besieged in a horrible civil war, most commonly thought to be between King Stephen and his sister, the Empress Matilda, though of course it was much more complicated than that. Whatever the ins and outs, an attacking position was established from where they could bombard the castle. This is still there and is now known as the Rings, close to the Church Knoll Road, just over there. Bad King John, in 1204, began spending money on the castle, added a big gloriette to live in, and had it whitewashed. Can you imagine how impressive it must have looked? Anyway, the castle remained important for hundreds of years. Elizabeth I liked it, stayed in it, but decided she couldn't afford it, so sold it to her Lord Chancellor. Later it was sold again to Sir John Banks, the right-hand man of Charles I. Then there was another civil war. Dorset was controlled by the parliamentarians. Corfe was on the wrong side. After the war, which Oliver Cromwell won, and Charles lost his head, Oliver decided the castle was so much trouble it must be slighted, in the language of the time. So a regiment of sappers in 1645 blew it up. More men died doing this than in the whole Civil War siege. To the villagers, however, this was Christmas, and the explosions precipitated a great building boom as they all rushed in and nicked all the best stone. And this is how the Curatage got a nice new inglenook in what is now the breakfast room, which is where Amelie and Esme were sitting when the lights went out. This was not an unusual event. Wiring in old houses is always suspect, despite the best efforts of modern electricians, and the fuses were forever blowing. It was still a bit scary, though. The adults had gone out, and fixing fuse boards was beyond them. Amelie knew where the torches were kept, so they soon both at least had light. Esme reported that the whole village was black after looking out of the window, so it was more than just a fuse. It was not that late, about 9 o'clock, but one of the things that dark magnifies is sound, or lack of it. It was very quiet. Old houses creak. They just do. And there are always other sounds. It's best not to let your imagination run away with you. Tonight the Curatage seemed restless, almost troubled. Or that is what the girls thought. What was that? Both girls jumped. It was coming from the cellar. Some indefinable noise, shuffling, grating, sighing. Silence. Oh, relief. And a light, but deep, banging far away, but definitely behind the cellar door. The girls looked at each other, an unspoken dare in the dark. Who was the bravest or the most foolish? Who would open the door? The banging stopped. It was very quiet. The girls almost involuntarily pushed themselves close together. This was no time to be alone. Seconds passed. Still silence. They started to relax. Then came the sigh. A long, deep, extremely sad sort of sigh. And it was just behind the cellar door, and they were just in front of it. Something passed through the door. Esme turned to see and found herself looking at the large mirror. Remember, it was dark. But here, in the reflection, was a face. A bearded man with long hair, a fine red hat, and a funny white collar. He looked afraid. Esme certainly was, and she screamed. Amelie turned too, caught a glimpse of the man in the mirror. She screamed too. Then the lights came on, and the back door opened. "What the heck's the matter with you two coloured daft ha'porths?" said Grandad, with a touch of his northern roots showing. "Pop up the station for half an hour, and you're in hysterics. You both look like you've seen a ghost. Anyway, we've got Looker and Yaya here now, so let's play some Monopoly." End of chapter 1. Bye.